All right, we're looking at a black spot on a gray paper. This is a Copic marker, just like a marker you might be using for a thumbnail. It's been given a little bit of a chance to dry here, but I'm gonna use that as a tone surface on a piece of toned paper. And if I take my Prismacolor pencil, and we're gonna think about the light source coming from above, and I'm going to put that specular shine in there. If this ends up not being quite bright enough, though I feel like it can be, I'll end up using some white gouache as a little brush stroke on top. Those of you without gouache as a material can totally use whiteout. Whiteout obviously is made to correct office in the office supply world, but it is a really opaque white. It's going to go on kind of thick, but it can be useful in this case as well. So I'm thinking about that light coming down, hitting that spot, reflecting into our eye. And so we get still the feeling of brightness on half of this, or a little bit more than half, on this sphere that I'm trying to draw. So what I'm thinking about first here is building that light away towards the terminator line, the core shadow relationship. I'm working with a mark that's not giving a lot of direction, so the grain is very soft, very unfocused in terms of direction. But if I were to work with a directional grain that kind of had a hatching approach, we could absolutely use that to build up form in another way. So this is really just one approach, and it's with a pencil that's kind of got a flattened end, so its surface is broad as it's hitting the marker. That means it's going to go on a little flatter, a little less like it's a line. So I'm building up, pushing a little bit sharper, a little bit harder. But if for some reason it feels like the paper surface isn't being filled up, I'll pull out a sharper pencil. Or you just sharpen your one or two pencils that you have so that they're both ready to go. But I'm moving towards, in the halftones right now, trying to define how bright this sphere really is, because there's not really a definition as to what the color is. I don't have one in front of me. I'm making this up right now. It's not a white sphere, that's for sure, because I won't be able to get this super white. Even this is not as white as a piece of white paper that I might bring in. It's a little dimmer than that. But before I go too far, I'm going to take a look at putting it on a brighter surface, brighter table surface. And by all means, draw this out in pencil first if you need to. Try to create a shadow with the paper color by surrounding it using that simultaneous contrast idea. And it's not going to be quite dark enough because the paper again is a little bit brighter mid-tone. I'm going to sneak up around that form of the cast shadow, around that shape. rotate your pencil a little bit. I might let it fade out. And, as I get closer to the form itself, I'm going to change directions a little bit just to make that easier to get close to. But if I do that, I'm going to transition those marks back out and away so they're not only visible right near the contour edge of that sphere, or it'll start to lift up the surface too much, meaning it won't lay down flat. All right, again, so it doesn't feel quite dark enough in there, and so you'll have to figure out for your own mind which media is going to make that gray color the right color. I am going to try to be careful not to mix it with the white when I do that. But before I get to that, really just looking at what I have here and saying, yeah, it's splitting 50-50. I've got dark and light, but in the dark I only have black. So it does need just a little bit of reflected light here to fill in the form. But I'm going to be incredibly careful not to go brighter than anything in this half. That the half in the light needs to completely feel brighter than anything in the shadow. So I'm going to leave it still black in there. I might touch a little bit of the texture just over it. Brightest area about there. And then let's see if I can push this side just a little bit brighter. I've got my gouache ready if I need to. There's a more of a fine line around the sphere right now that you'll notice might show up a little bit more as a line. It's going to be relative to your own taste whether you like outlines or not. I'm going to try to soften it a little bit right now. The difference is literally just that the marker surface is leaving a flatter tone to accept the dry media back over top of it. The outline was done with the same brand, Copic, but a liner brush. So there's just a little bit of a different texture. So it doesn't accept the pencil quite as much. So just brightening around here, brightening it a little bit more. Control this edge just a little bit. And then I'm ready to move down. And I'm going to use just a little bit of graphite. If you have a gray colored pencil, that would work really well because the texture is present in the light out here. So it might be something that I take and come back in here and try to burnish this out a little bit more. Or I can touch into this with a little bit of the charcoal and find that connects to the surface a little bit better. And I might just wash it over with my finger just a little bit. Near the connection here, I'm picturing this almost floating up a little bit. Can be a little bit darker though near it. Not quite a recessed dark because there's a little bit of air between it and the ground. but I wouldn't find a sharp edge around that cast shadow because you can see it just right here. The form is closer to the ground. The shadow is a little bit sharper. As I lift this off, we get a fuzzier shadow here. As this distance from where the shadow is cast down to the surface increases, it gets softer. So the sharpest part of it would be right around here. This is the furthest distance. It's going to be a little bit softer out there. So I can try to give a little bit firmer edge here. It's not going to be as sharp as the outline that I did with the pen, so I'm in no danger there. But for all intents and purposes, we call that a useful experiment and a way to start to separate some levels of space that you could certainly use darks to hold a foreground, contrast that with a recession into a brighter space where you wouldn't use any of the ink at all. So this is a really good way to start to silhouette your figures and create a little distance between them. So try the marker. This would also work with some India ink, though you do want to be careful of the India ink. Occasionally it'll get a little bit shiny and it's not going to accept the colored pencil as well as the marker will, which is a nice flat, smooth black. You don't have to wait for it to dry very long either. So get those markers out, try them. Again, it can be on the gray paper, or it could even be on the white paper, and work back and forth between lights and darks.